Welcome into the latest edition of the Zoneheads podcast, presented by Kevin Crager, our go-to real estate agent, one of the top 25 producing agents in Central Florida. If you need a realtor, you need one that you can trust, Kevin Crager is going to treat your money like it's his very own. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin Crager to guide you every step of the way. Call him at 407-702-4635. If you're watching on YouTube, the number scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Welcome in, Zoneheads. It's a unique week for yours truly. We have Monday and Tuesday off of In the Zone this week, so I thought it would be a good time to pop in and deliver some of that bonus content. I am excited to get into this. The Top 12 series the next couple of weeks on this podcast channel is going to be dedicated to wrapping our minds around who the top 12 players are in fantasy football at each position. Today we're doing wide receivers, running backs. Next week, quarterbacks, tight ends still to come as well. Big changes coming soon on In the Zone. Excited and anxious to get into all the details as we roll out that slowly over the next couple of weeks. But by August, we should have a firm grasp on what's going on for all of us. Still some things to be buttoned up on the back end for me. So I'm not trying to play coy with all of you. There's still questions that I don't know the answer to, but I know that the show is going to be changing, and we'll get into all of that over the course of the next couple of weeks. The live show, as I mentioned, off on Monday and Tuesday. And so I am outside of doing this, I'm going to sit back and relax, enjoy some alone time. I've got, once I'm done recording this episode, I'm off to Topgolf to embarrass myself publicly. So we'll see how that goes. Wide receivers in fantasy football. Let's not waste your time. Let's get right into it. The new running back in many ways used to have to be Randy Moss or Terrell Owens in their prime to go top 3 at wide receiver in a fantasy draft. Now the league is so pass happy. The NFL has just created such consistency out of this position. And I think it's the position that you have to nail the most if you want to have success in fantasy football. They're all important, but if you don't get wide receiver right, the amount of points that these guys are scoring, the consistency and upside that they provide, you have to have some of that on your fantasy roster. And it's becoming one of the tougher positions to find that breakout star that can be a top 5 guy, because we know who all of these players are. And once you have that firm base of, it's hard to wake up as an undrafted, speaking in fantasy football terms, somebody that is off the waiver wire or somebody that gets drafted in round 12 and become Justin Jefferson. It does happen, Puka Nacua, but it is becoming fewer and further between that you can jump into that stratosphere. I think at running back, that path is much clearer. It's still hard to nail that position as well, but with the amount of injuries that we see at running back and how plug and play some of these backups can be, Isaac Guerrero is not Christian McCaffrey, but if he can give you similar sort of production in the points department, then your team doesn't take a nosedive. You can't replace the Jamar Chases of the world. There's no handcuff that's going to bring to the table what he does in terms of scoring. So with that, I want upside. I want big playability at this position. This position. Think about what that translates to in the real NFL. If you can consistently get into the end zone, create chunk plays for your offense, coaches and quarterbacks are just going to keep feeding you the rock. So I want players who make life easy on their offenses, because those are going to be the players with the most predictable outcomes. Volume is important, but I think at wide receiver specifically, explosion is just as important sometimes, because you can have a big game with 3 catches. You can have one of the top scoring weeks with just a couple of grabs if your catches are explosive enough. You have 2 50-yard catches, both go for touchdowns. You have 2 catches, 100 yards, and 2 scores. That doesn't happen at the running back position. You have to have volume in order to produce. So let's get into it. The top 12 wide receivers for me in fantasy football. Number 1 on the list is Jamar Chase. He is the most explosive wide receiver in the NFL. So talking about explosion, you're not going to get better than this in one of the best offenses in the league with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. This guy broke fantasy records last season, first player in NFL history with 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns. Also led the league with 127 catches in PPR. To me, he's a no-brainer. Number one overall, not just the top wide receiver. I think Ja'Marr Chase is the number one player in fantasy football. Water break. Number two, Justin Jefferson, best separator in the NFL, which is why he has been virtually quarterback proof, which is crazy to say. We've seen him go through Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs. He helped revive Sam Darnold. So I'm not worried about JJ McCarthy. And honestly, I think we have to at least keep it in the back of our minds that it's possible that this is an upgrade. This could be the best quarterback that he has had in quite some time. So I am still very excited about drafting Justin Jefferson. Again, not just the number two wide receiver. To me, Justin Jefferson should be number two off the board in fantasy football. Number three, CeeDee Lamb. Lamb proved not to be quarterback proof with Dak Prescott, which is part of the reason why, to me, there's a teardrop. Those two guys at the top, Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, and then CeeDee Lamb's kind of in his own category because he needs Dak Prescott in order to be CeeDee Lamb. But if those two are on the field together, we're talking about one of the best wide receivers in the league. Contested catches, big plays. He's a target hound. And I think George Pickens' arrival should only help in terms of consistency. And now you can't load up on CeeDee Lamb as a defense like you could in the past. You're still going to see double teams, but I think Lamb is significantly better in terms of those two. So it's not like George Pickens is going to come in and dominate targets. I think he's going to play a very specific role in that offense. This is very much a 1 and 2 situation, not a 1A, 1B. Number 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, I think that most rankings that you look at are going to have Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb as 1, 2, and 3, and probably in that exact order. From 4 through 12, I feel like this is where we get to the Baskin-Robbins portion of wide receivers. You're going to see a lot of these same names within top 12s in completely different orders. And so this is very specific to me and what I am looking for. I mentioned at the top, consistency is the number one thing that I'm looking at the wide receiver position. What do you look like year over year? Can I trust your offense? Can I trust your quarterback? Explosiveness is probably the second most important thing to me. Amon-Ra St. Brown does not have that, but he blows it out of the water in terms of consistency. Once you get past those big three, just target a guy that you know is going to be productive. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been top 7 2 straight seasons. He plays in the best offense in the NFL. And for a smaller wide receiver, he dominates end zone targets. I found this statistic that kind of blew me away. He doubled up Puka Nacua and Malik Nabors last year with 2 end zone targets per game. Both of those guys with just 1. So even though he's smaller, Jared Goff still looks his way when they get towards the end zone. So love every single bit of that. Amon-Ra St. Brown would have to see an injury, which is going to derail anybody and can happen to anybody. He would have to see that in order to not crack the top 7 again. So you kind of know exactly what you're getting with St. Brown. Number 5 for me, Puka Nacua. Now, Puka does have Devontae Adams to contend with for targets, but he's been getting by just fine with Cooper Kupp next to him, and he just continues to ascend. He did miss some time last year. That makes me a little bit nervous about Puka Nacua, but I'm just going to push the injury concern to the side. He dealt with a lot of injuries in college. That's part of the reason why he fell in the real NFL draft and wasn't the star wide receiver coming into the league. He didn't become that until week 1 of his rookie season, but there's a reason why this guy popped off so soon in his NFL career. He's outstanding. And when we talk about offenses, I want a wide receiver that is the number 1 in their offense with Sean McVay scheming up plays to get him open. He averaged 7 catches per game last season, and that to me is the low water mark. Number 6, Malik Nabors. Now, for me, that was the most debate that I had in my mind of this entire list, is what to do at 5 and 6 between Puka Nacua and Malik Nabors, because both of them check so many boxes for me in what I'm looking for. Malik Nabors, the more explosive of the two. I think he It looks like he has more upside, but when you really think about it, does he? Puka Nacua at his best could lead the NFL in receptions, and that's the kind of guy that you want in fantasy football. I'm not sure that that's the case for Malik Nabors. I think what he does looks better on tape. It looks better on TV. He is a highlight hound. Also an excellent wide receiver, which is why he's top 6. But he's number 6 for me, going from Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, that combo, to Russell Wilson's potentially Jameis Winston or Jackson Dart, a massive upgrade at wide receiver. Nabors was a stud year 1. Even with everything working against him in that offense, he was still wide receiver 6 in PPR in year 1. Tons of upside. And as I mentioned, maybe more than anything else with Nabors, he just passes the eye test with flying colors. This guy is a stud number 1 wide receiver. No issue if he's the first player taken for me in a fantasy draft. At number 7, I'm going with Nico Collins, and this is where that explosiveness really comes into play for me and what zooms him up the board. Nico wasn't the same last year. After his hamstring injury, he was hovering around 20 yards per catch prior to week 5. Think about that. That is a crazy number. After that, his stats fell off considerably. On a per target basis, though, he is still as good as anybody else on the field. The issue isn't so much the injury. It's football. These things happen. It's the unknown around him. Laramie Tunsil is gone, so the O-line takes a hit. They have new receivers in that offense that are going to compete for targets. Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, who they drafted pretty high in the NFL draft, a new offensive coordinator. And you still have to ask the question, can CJ Stroud get better? Because it felt like he took a step back in year 2 as opposed to year 1. Probably he's the best big play wide receiver on the board, which is why he's firmly inside of my top 10. I have him at number 7. That's Nico Collins for those keeping track at home. Number 8, Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am undeterred by this Travis Hunter selection. I think Hunter is going to be a really valuable player in terms of real football, but I think he's going to be used as more of a gadget than a target hound type of player. If Trevor Lawrence knows what's good for him, he's going to continue to feed Brian Thomas Jr. Liam Cohen did wonders for that Bucs passing attack. I'm excited to see what he can do potentially to unlock the Trevor and Thomas Jr. combo. These two can be one of the most dangerous pairings in the NFL. Keep in mind, a lot of Brian Thomas Jr.'s production last year came with Mac Jones at quarterback. This guy is just incredible and explosive plays. He can bring that to you. He can do a lot on a few targets. At number 9, I have Drake London. I have to be honest about this. I sort of had to force myself to put him this high. The stats just back it up. But for whatever reason, Drake London kind of bores me. But you can't deny what this guy does on the football field. So boredom aside, he is a great pick in early on in drafts this year. I love me some targets, and this guy gets them. 158 last year, put him 3rd in the NFL in targets. And Drake London led the league in red zone targets as well. So this is not an empty stat, just a guy that's filling it up between the 20s. He scored 7 touchdowns last year. And for somebody that had as many red zone targets as he had, that's a pretty low number. I think the question is, how good can Michael Penix Jr. be? But Drake London should be a top 10 wide receiver this year in fantasy football. Number 10 is where I'm just going to go ahead and shoot this guy up the list because I am geeked up about Jackson Smith-Njigba of the Seattle Seahawks. He took a huge jump in production in year 2, 628 yards in year 1, over 1,100 yards in year 2. That is great year-over-year improvement. And the biggest portion of that in terms of a second-year leap came when they started using him as the focal point in the offensive attack. Once DK Metcalf got hurt, he averaged 9.1 targets, 17.7 PPR points per game. They did add Cooper Kupp, who's good enough at this stage in his career to draw coverage, but not consistent enough to be their number 1 wide receiver. So I think they're going to look the way of the youth on that team. They moved off of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf for a reason, because it is wheels up for Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I think also gets a quarterback upgrade. I like Sam Darnold a little bit more than Geno Smith. At number 11, Ladd McConkey of the Chargers. He led the team in targets in year 1 by a mile, 20 more targets than Quentin Johnston, and the Chargers did nothing to bolster that position. Clearly, they think highly of what he can continue to produce, nearly 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. I'm really high on the Chargers as a whole this year. I'm high on their offense, and I am bought in on Lad McConkey in that top 12 range. I have him at number 11. And rounding out the top 12 at wide receiver, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. Part of the reason Tennessee moved off of him in 2021 was because of health concerns. Brown struggled to stay on the field. And of course, when he plays, his offense, is as good as it gets in terms of what he does deep down the field, in terms of what he does in contested catch situations. He only played 13 games in 2024. So that makes me a little nervous. This is a guy that had injury issues. He got away from it for a couple of seasons, and now we're starting to see it rear its ugly head as he gets closer to 30. So just some concerns there. I love him as a player, but this is also not an offense that wants to throw the ball a bunch throughout the course of the game. This is one of the lowest passing attacks in the league. Jalen Hurts runs the football. They still have Saquon Barkley, one of the best offensive lines in the league. And Devontae Smith is a full-blown star at wide receiver by himself. So I love him. I'm just not willing to overpay for A.J. Brown. And honestly, I could be convinced to take him outside of my top 12, but for right now, he sits firmly right there. That does it for this week's episode. Be back at it next week with my top 12 running backs in fantasy football. Make sure to visit zoneheadsmedia.com to keep up with everything that I've got going on. Today's bet card for Major League Baseball is updated as well. At Brandon Kravitz, at Zoneheads on social is how you can find me on the daily. Chat soon, Zoneheads.